You believe in curses? I didn't, until the night a cargo load started screaming my name, and the worst part? It's still screaming. 15 years I've been hauling freight across this country, seen things that would make most people quit their jobs and move to the suburbs. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened on that godforsaken stretch between Nevada and Utah. Some nights I still wake up in cold sweats, hearing those voices echoing from inside my trailer. The call came in around 6 p.m. on a Tuesday, one of those rush jobs that pays triple rate if you don't ask questions. The dispatcher's voice was different, professional in a way that made my skin crawl, like he was reading from a script. Pharmaceutical products, temperature controlled, Nevada to Utah, no stops, no inspections. He emphasized that last part twice, which should have been my first red flag. But the money was too good to pass up, and Linda's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves. I picked up the trailer from a warehouse that looked more like a medical facility than a shipping depot. White walls, sterile smell, security cameras tracking my every move as I backed up to the loading dock. The workers wore full hazmat suits, which they said was standard protocol for sensitive pharmaceuticals. The trailer was already sealed, locked with electronic locks that I'd never seen before. When I hooked up the refrigeration unit, the temperature reading showed -20 degrees, colder than I'd ever hauled anything. Rolling out onto I-80 at sunset, everything seemed normal at first. The rig handled well, the refrigeration unit hummed steadily, and the CB radio crackled with the usual chatter from other drivers. But as darkness settled over the desert, an eerie quiet fell over the highway. Mile after mile passed without seeing another truck, which was strange for this route. The only sound was the steady drone of my engine and the occasional metallic ping from the trailer, probably just the cargo settling, I told myself. Around mile 127, I heard the first thud against the inside wall of the trailer. It was soft, but deliberate, like someone had bumped into something in the dark. I checked my mirrors, adjusted the CB, tried to convince myself it was just boxes shifting around. The pharmaceutical companies always packed their stuff tight, and temperature changes could make things expand and contract. But there was something about that sound that made my hands tighten on the steering wheel, something that didn't feel quite right. By mile 156, the CB radio started picking up interference, static mixed with what sounded like muffled voices. At first I thought it was just atmospheric conditions, maybe a storm system moving through. But as I fine-tuned the frequency, the sounds became clearer, more disturbing. It wasn't just static, there were patterns in it, rhythms that almost sounded like breathing. I switched channels, but the interference followed me, growing stronger as the miles rolled past. The refrigeration warning light started flashing red around mile 189, indicating the temperature was rising. I pulled over to check the unit, my boots crunching on the gravel shoulder as I walked back to inspect the trailer. The compressor was working, but something was wrong. The air coming from the vents smelled strange, not like the usual chemical coolant. It was sweet and cloying, with an undertone that reminded me of something I couldn't quite place, something that made my stomach turn and my mouth go dry. Getting back in the cab, I noticed scratching sounds coming from behind me, faint but persistent. At first I thought it might be tree branches scraping the side of the trailer as we passed through a wooded section. But the scratching continued, even when we were in open desert, growing more frantic as the night wore on. It sounded almost like fingernails on metal, desperate and rhythmic. I cranked up the radio to drown it out, but somehow those sounds seemed to cut right through the music. Mile 201 brought the sound that changed everything. 3 deliberate knocks against the trailer wall, followed by silence, then 3 more knocks. This wasn't cargo shifting or metal expanding. This was intentional, purposeful, almost like a signal. My heart started racing as I realized what I might be hearing, but my mind rejected the possibility. Pharmaceutical products don't knock on walls. Boxes don't tap out patterns in the darkness. Yet there it was again. Knock, knock, knock. As mile 267 approached on my odometer, I heard something that made my blood freeze in my veins. Clear as day, cutting through the engine noise and road sounds, came a human scream from inside the trailer. Not the mechanical groan of shifting cargo or the hiss of hydraulics, an actual human voice filled with terror and desperation. My foot hit the brake pedal so hard the air brakes hissed like angry serpents, and the rig shuddered to a stop on the dark shoulder. In the sudden silence that followed, I could hear my own heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. My hands shook so violently I could barely turn off the engine, the keys jangling like wind chimes in a storm. The desert silence was deafening after hours of road noise, broken only by the steady hum of the refrigeration unit and my own ragged breathing. Every instinct screamed at me to get back in that cab and drive until I hit the Utah border, but I couldn't ignore what I'd heard. That scream had been real, human, desperate, and it was coming from my trailer. I sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, trying to convince myself I was losing my mind. The smell hit me the moment I stepped out of the cab. Not the chemical coolant I'd noticed before, but something organic and wrong. It was the smell of a hospital mixed with something else, something that made my stomach lurch and bile rise in my throat. The desert air should have been clean and dry, but this odor clung to everything like invisible fog. My work boots felt heavy as concrete as I forced myself toward the back of the trailer. Each step echoed in the darkness, and I swear I could hear something moving inside, shifting and shuffling like mice in the walls of an old house. The electronic locks were still engaged, their red LED lights blinking like angry eyes in the darkness. My hands fumbled with the override key the warehouse supervisor had given me, the metal cold and slippery with my nervous sweat. "Just pharmaceutical supplies," I whispered to myself, a prayer to whatever gods watch over stupid truckers making bad decisions. The first lock disengaged with a soft beep that sounded unnaturally loud in the desert silence. As I reached for the second lock, I heard it again. Not a scream this time, but a soft whimpering like a wounded animal trying not to attract predators. The trailer doors swung open with a mechanical groan, and the refrigerated air rolled out like fog from a morgue. Inside, the LED strips cast everything in harsh white light, revealing rows of medical containers stacked floor to ceiling. Most were sealed with biohazard warnings and temperature monitors, but one container near the front had been damaged, its lid askew. The smell was overwhelming now, a mixture of disinfectant, fear, and something I didn't want to identify. My flashlight beam trembled as I stepped into the trailer, the metal floor ringing hollow beneath my boots. That's when I saw the first pair of eyes staring back at me from the damaged container, human eyes wide with terror and reflecting my flashlight like a deer caught in headlights. My heart stopped, literally stopped for what felt like an eternity, before hammering back to life with enough force to crack my ribs. Inside the container, barely visible through layers of plastic sheeting, was a person, unconscious or drugged, connected to tubes and wires. As my vision adjusted, I realized there were more containers, all of them occupied, all of them breathing softly in rhythm with life support systems I hadn't even noticed running. A weak voice whispered from the nearest container, so quiet I almost missed it over the hum of the refrigeration unit. "Please, help us." The words hit me like physical blows, each syllable confirming my worst fears and shattering what remained of my sanity. These weren't pharmaceutical products. They were people, human beings packed like cargo in my trailer. Some appeared to be sleeping, others stared at me with eyes that held too much knowledge of their situation. I counted at least a dozen containers, maybe more in the shadows at the back of the trailer, each one a nightmare I'd been unknowingly transporting across state lines. My cell phone showed no signal, just empty bars mocking me from the screen as I frantically tried to call 911. The nearest town was 50 miles back, the next one 60 miles ahead, and I was standing in the middle of nowhere with a trailer full of kidnapped people. Panic clawed at my throat as I realized the full scope of what I'd stumbled into. This wasn't just human trafficking, it was something far more organized, more sinister. The medical equipment, the precise temperature control, the professional documentation. This operation had resources, connections, power. That's when I heard the engines approaching from both directions, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. My blood turned to ice water as I realized they'd been following me, probably tracking the trailer's GPS the entire time. 3 black SUVs emerged from the night, surrounding my rig with military precision, their occupants already moving before the vehicles came to a complete stop. Men in dark suits stepped out, their movements calm and deliberate, like they'd done this dance 100 times before. One of them spoke into a radio, his voice carrying across the desert air. "Package inspection in progress. Stand by for cleanup protocol." The lead figure approached with the casual confidence of someone who owned the night, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel shoulder. He wasn't hurried, wasn't concerned about witnesses or evidence, which told me everything I needed to know about how this was going to end. "Mechanical problems, Ricardo?" he asked, using my name like we were old friends meeting for coffee. His smile was perfectly practiced, the kind politicians wear while lying to cameras. Behind him, his associates were already setting up equipment, cameras, recording devices, document cases, turning my nightmare into a bureaucratic procedure. The man in the expensive suit pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through what looked like contracts and shipping manifests. "Says here you signed for this cargo personally, Ricardo. Acknowledged the contents, accepted full responsibility for secure transport." His voice was reasonable, almost sympathetic, like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis with practiced bedside manner. I tried to protest, to explain that I didn't know, but he raised a hand to silence me. "The paperwork suggests otherwise, my friend. These recordings will show you opened the trailer voluntarily, inspected the contents and, well, we'll see what the investigation reveals about your involvement in this unfortunate situation." The documents they showed me were perfect, too perfect, with my signature on shipping manifests I'd never seen before. Every page detailed the specialized medical transport I'd supposedly agreed to, complete with hazard acknowledgements and containment protocols written in my own handwriting. The suit-wearing man flipped through the papers like a magician, revealing his final trick, each page another nail in my coffin. "You initialed here, acknowledging the live cargo," he said, pointing to a signature that looked exactly like mine but felt like staring at a ghost. My mouth went dry as I realized how long they'd been planning this, how carefully they'd constructed this web around me. I tried running then, pure animal panic overriding any rational thought as I bolted toward the desert darkness. My boots hit the sand, and I made it maybe 50 yards before the spotlights found me, turning night into harsh day and destroying what little hope I had left. They didn't chase me, didn't even raise their voices, just stood there watching like parents waiting for a child to tire himself out. When I stumbled back, gasping and defeated, the lead man was lighting a cigarette with the casual air of someone who'd seen this scene play out countless times. "Feel better?" he asked, not unkindly, as if my breakdown was just another item on his checklist. The cleanup was surgical in its efficiency. The containers were transferred to refrigerated trucks that appeared from nowhere, the people inside still unconscious or too terrified to make a sound. I watched helplessly as they erased every trace of what I'd discovered, replacing it with legitimate pharmaceutical supplies that matched the original shipping manifest. Within an hour, my trailer looked exactly like what it was supposed to be carrying, complete with proper documentation and temperature logs. One of the technicians even sprayed some kind of chemical deodorizer to eliminate the smell I'd noticed earlier, whistling softly while he worked like he was detailing a car. They gave me a choice, if you could call it that: cooperate with their story or face federal charges for human trafficking across state lines. The evidence against me was overwhelming. Financial records showing unusual payments to my account, security footage of me accepting the trailer, even testimony from witnesses who'd seen me acting suspiciously at truck stops. "We're not unreasonable people, Ricardo," the man explained, while showing me photos of Linda at the grocery store, at her doctor's appointments, walking our dog in the park. Accidents happen, misunderstandings occur, but life goes on for those wise enough to learn from their mistakes. The psychological evaluation report was already prepared, describing my stress-induced hallucinations and recommending immediate counseling for long-haul drivers experiencing isolation psychosis. They had experts ready to testify about the effects of sleep deprivation, the dangers of stimulant abuse, the way guilt could manifest as false memories in traumatized individuals. Everything was documented, filed, and sealed before I even knew what was happening. My medical records, psychiatric evaluations, even statements from colleagues about my recent erratic behavior. I was being systematically discredited before I'd even tried to speak out. The drive to Utah was a waking nightmare, every mile marker counting down to my complicity in something I couldn't even fully comprehend. My hands gripped the steering wheel like a lifeline, while my mind raced through endless scenarios of escape, revelation, justice, all of them ending with Linda's funeral and my own mysterious disappearance. The CB radio stayed silent now. No more interference or strange voices, just the empty hiss of frequencies that nobody was using. Behind me, the trailer carried exactly what the manifest said it carried, but I could still smell that hospital odor clinging to my clothes, my hair, my soul. At the delivery point in Salt Lake City, everything proceeded normally. Too normally, like a movie being played for an audience of investigators who might be watching. The receiving crew signed the paperwork, checked the temperature logs, even complimented me on the excellent condition of the cargo during transport. One of them mentioned how professional I'd been throughout the entire process, how they wished all drivers were as careful with sensitive medical supplies. I signed the completion forms with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, my signature looking foreign and wrong on the official documents. The nightmares started immediately, vivid dreams, where I could hear those voices calling my name from inside sealed containers. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those terrified faces staring back at me from the darkness of my trailer. Linda noticed the change, tried to get me to see a doctor, but how could I explain that I'd become part of something so evil I couldn't even speak its name out loud? The prescription sleep aids they gave me only made the dreams more intense, more real, until I couldn't tell the difference between sleeping and waking horror. 3 weeks later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox with no return address, containing another shipping manifest and a familiar electronic key. The pickup location was different this time, the destination somewhere in Arizona, but the payment structure was identical to the Nevada job. Inside the envelope was also a newspaper clipping about a successful organ donation program that had saved dozens of lives, complete with quotes from grateful recipients and their families. At the bottom, someone had written in pencil, "Good work has its rewards, Ricardo. Your country thanks you for your service." Now I sit here 5 years later, still driving but never sleeping well, still hauling legitimate cargo but always listening for sounds that shouldn't be there. The authorities never came looking for me, because according to their records, nothing unusual ever happened that night in the Nevada desert. Sometimes I catch glimpses of black SUVs in my mirrors, or notice the same faces at different truck stops, but I never try to run anymore. If you see a blue Kenworth with Paraguay plates rolling through your town at night, don't wave, don't flash your lights, and if you hear screaming, just keep driving, friend, because some cargo never stops calling your name. The second job came with a bonus I hadn't asked for. A new CB radio installed while I was sleeping at a truck stop in Barstow. When I confronted the mechanic about it, he showed me a work order with my signature and payment already processed. "Said you wanted the deluxe model with extended range," he explained, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that smelled like disinfectant. The radio looked identical to my old one, but something felt different about it. The weight, the way the frequencies seemed to find me instead of me finding them. That night, as I rolled toward Phoenix with another pharmaceutical load, voices began whispering through the static, calling my name like old friends welcoming me home. The Arizona pickup was at a veterinary research facility, disguised as a pet hospital, complete with fake barking sounds playing from hidden speakers. They loaded my trailer with containers that looked medical, but moved wrong, too heavy for medicine, too light for equipment, with that same chemical smell that now made my stomach turn. A woman in scrubs handed me the manifest with a smile that never reached her eyes, her latex gloves snapping as she peeled them off. "Safe travels, Ricardo," she said, using my name like a password between conspirators. I signed the papers with a hand that had stopped shaking months ago, resignation having replaced terror in my daily routine. Somewhere outside Flagstaff, the containers started their familiar symphony. Soft thumping, muffled cries, the rhythm of human hearts beating against metal walls. I pulled over at a rest stop and sat in my cab, watching families play with their children in the playground, while death rode silent in my trailer. A state trooper approached, tapping on my window with the casual authority of someone just doing their job. But when I rolled down the glass, he smiled that same empty smile I'd learned to recognize and handed me a thermos of coffee. "Compliments of the highway patrol," he said, his eyes never quite meeting mine as he walked away, whistling. The delivery point in Tucumcari was a meat processing plant that operated only at night, its windows painted black and parking lot empty except for my rig. Workers in hazmat suits unloaded my cargo without speaking, their movements efficient and practiced in the harsh fluorescent lighting. I watched them disappear into the building, carrying containers that had whispered my name for 300 miles, and I felt something die inside me that I hadn't even known was still alive. The plant supervisor handed me an envelope, thick with cash and a new manifest for tomorrow's pickup, this time in New Mexico, destination unknown. "You're becoming quite reliable, Ricardo," he said, and I heard pride in his voice that made me want to vomit. The third job broke something fundamental in my psyche, something I didn't even realize was whole until it shattered like glass under pressure. This time the cargo was different, smaller containers, but the sounds coming from inside were worse than anything I'd transported before. Children's voices, high and terrified, calling for their mothers in languages I didn't recognize, but somehow understood perfectly. I made it 50 miles before pulling over to scream into the desert night, my voice joining the chorus of horror emanating from my trailer. When I finally stopped, throat raw and soul empty, I heard applause crackling through the CB radio. Slow, deliberate clapping from an audience I couldn't see, but knew was always watching. 5 years of this nightmare have passed, and I've learned the rules of survival in a game where winning means becoming the monster you once feared. The envelopes keep coming, the jobs keep finding me, and I keep signing manifests for cargo that shouldn't exist in any sane world. My truck has become a hearse on wheels, ferrying the damned across state lines while I count mile markers like a priest counting prayers. Linda left me 2 years ago, taking our dog and what remained of her sanity after watching me transform into something she no longer recognized. The divorce papers came with a note. I hope you find whatever you're looking for out there, because it's not me anymore. The other drivers at truck stops avoid me now, sensing something wrong in the way I smell like hospitals and move like a ghost. They whisper about the blue Kenworth that only runs at night, carrying loads that make grown men cross themselves and check their locks. Some claim they've seen me at impossible distances, my rig appearing in their mirrors on roads I've never traveled, as if my truck has developed the ability to exist in multiple places simultaneously. The truth is simpler and more terrifying. There are others like me now, an entire fleet of unwilling accomplices ferrying nightmares across America's highways. We recognize each other by the hollow look in our eyes and the way we check our trailers compulsively, as if hoping to find them empty just once. Last month I tried to quit, parking my rig at a truck stop in Oklahoma and walking away with nothing but the clothes on my back. Within 6 hours, they found me at a motel 20 miles away, not with threats or violence, but with photographs, surveillance images of every person I'd ever cared about, complete with daily schedules and vulnerability assessments. The man who delivered them was different from the suits I'd grown accustomed to, younger and more direct in his approach to persuasion. The program has invested considerable resources in your development, Ricardo, he explained, while spreading the photos across my motel bed like a dealer showing his hand. Retirement isn't really an option, but we appreciate your dedication to public service. The nightmares have evolved beyond simple replays of past horrors into something more insidious, prophetic dreams where I see tomorrow's cargo before I pick it up. I wake knowing exactly what I'll be carrying, how many containers, what sounds they'll make as I drive through the darkness toward destinations that don't appear on any legitimate map. Sometimes the dreams show me the faces of the people inside, their stories, their families searching for them with diminishing hope. I've started keeping a journal of these visions, not out of guilt or some misguided attempt at redemption, but because forgetting them feels like the final betrayal of whatever humanity I have left. The CB radio has become my confessional booth, broadcasting my sins to an audience of truckers who think they're hearing ghost stories or urban legends. I tell them about the screaming cargo, the black SUVs, the envelopes that arrive without postmarks, and they respond with nervous laughter or uncomfortable silence. But sometimes, late at night when the highways are empty and the static is thick, I hear other voices joining mine. Drivers sharing their own tales of impossible loads and midnight deliveries to places that shouldn't exist. We've become a brotherhood of the damned, united by cargo that haunts us and roads that never seem to lead home. Tonight I'm writing this from a rest stop in Utah, the same stretch of highway where this all began 5 years ago. In my trailer sits another load of containers, their contents mercifully quiet for now, but I know that will change once I start rolling again. The envelope for my next job is already waiting in my cab, addressed in that familiar handwriting that appears to belong to no one and everyone simultaneously. Inside, I know I'll find another manifest, another destination, another payment for services rendered to a cause I've never fully understood, but can no longer escape. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed in the cab that first night, if I'd ignored the screaming and driven straight through to Utah without stopping. Would someone else be sitting in this rest stop now, writing their own confession to strangers on the CB radio? Or was I always destined for this role, chosen long before that first envelope arrived, groomed for a purpose I never saw coming until it was far too late to run? The thing that terrifies me most isn't the cargo I carry or the people who control my routes. It's the realization that I've stopped trying to save the souls in my trailer. Somewhere along this endless highway, I crossed a line from victim to accomplice, from unwilling participant to integral component of a machine that devours innocence and converts it into something profitable. I sign the manifests now without reading them, accept the payments without counting them, deliver the cargo without looking back. But the voices still follow me, growing stronger with each job, more personal with each mile. They know my name, my history, my fears, and they whisper them back to me through the static whenever I try to find peace in the darkness. The cargo I carry has become part of me, their screams echoing in my chest like a second heartbeat that syncs with my own. I am the truck is me, and together we roll through the American night, delivering nightmares to destinations that exist only on manifests signed in blood. If you see my blue Kenworth on the highway tonight, don't try to flag me down. Don't flash your lights in greeting, and whatever you do, don't listen too closely to the sounds coming from my trailer. Some knowledge is too heavy for the human soul to carry, and some highways only lead deeper into darkness. I've been driving for 5 years now, and I still haven't reached my final destination, but I'm beginning to suspect that the journey itself is the punishment, and the road I'm on doesn't have an exit ramp.